So, like many of you, I'm watching Love Story on Hulu about Caroline Kennedy and John F. Kennedy Jr., and I love the series. And I'm flattered that there's so much interest in the 1990s. I was in my 20s. I was born in 72, so in 1992, I was 20 years old. The 90s, we didn't have cell phones, you didn't have apps. You went out on dates through, I would put personal ads in the local paper. I was in Texas at the time, in grad school from 1994, the fall, until 1997. And that's when I started dating, because my undergraduate years, I was so busy practicing piano 12 to 15 hours a day that I barely had a social life. So it wasn't until I got to graduate school that I really came out as a gay person. And you met people by putting ads in the paper, and then you would call in, and then you would listen to the message, and then you would call the person. They would leave a number. You call them and then arrange a date. You would meet in a restaurant or coffee shop and go from there. There was no apps, no cell phones. I didn't get my first cell phone until 2000 when I worked for my first airline, and I was on call, so I had to get a pager and a cell phone. I was so nervous about missing calls from scheduling that as a backup, I got myself a pager also. And then we had cell phones with antennas. I remember my first one was a Motorola, had a long antenna and a battery pack that you attached to the back. It was black. There was you couldn't take pictures with it. You certainly couldn't watch movies with it. You just use it like a phone, regular phone. You dial, and then scheduling would call me for a trip, and then I would pick up, or I would have a pager. They would call my pager as a backup number. Then I would call them back. You had 15 minutes to call them back, or you'll get a missed assignment. And I didn't have a car in the 90s. I was in college, and in my first year working for the airlines in New York City, you didn't need a car. I was living in Kew Gardens, Queens, and took public transportation everywhere. We had the Metro card, so you had to swipe and add money to the Metro card. And there was no Google Maps. You literally had to look up, figure out where you were, look for landmarks. And then I remember driving to college with my college friend at the time from San Antonio to Corpus Christi. And she had a map book, and she would take a marker and map out our route. And if we got lost, we would pull into a gas station and just ask the employee in the gas store, like, hey, we're supposed to make this intersection. I think we missed it. And you didn't text people, you wrote letters. I still have a letter my mother wrote me when I was in college, and if I wanted to call, I had to call collect. It's very expensive, and you had to save your coins and put it in the phone. It was, we had to line up in the hallway of the dorm. And also in grad school, we had a landline. My roommate and I shared it, and so at the time we had AOL. And so if you had to be on the phone, you couldn't be on the internet, and you had to wait for someone to get off the phone so that you could connect and be on the internet. Chat rooms were just coming out, and you were just sending emails. And then I remember having to go to the computer lab to write papers and print with an inkjet printer. So that was different. And then there's no food delivery. You literally went to the restaurant to order food for takeout. A lot of it was, you didn't document everything. You didn't document your whole life. So, I mean, if you took photos, you had to go to CVS, or later on when I joined Costco, we'll go to Costco Photo Lab and have them process the film from your camera. So, I mean, that's what life was like in the 90s. And I would like to go back to my 20s, But with the technology of today, would love to have an iPhone and bring it back in time to the 90s. And as for fashion, really, we dress, well, my dad called me a ragamuffin. He said I look like a ragamuffin. So just t-shirt and jeans. I shopped a lot at thrift stores because as a college student, didn't have much money and couldn't afford anything brand new. So you either wait for your parents to give it to you for Christmas or your birthdays, or you just went to thrift shops and bought Guess jeans and went to Sears a lot. Had a roommate that worked for them. Target was another one. Walmart, Kmart. Yeah, and I like thrift shops, and I still do. I'm 54 years old, and I still love thrift shops. So we did a lot of our shopping in thrift shops. I remember shopping at H-E-B, the grocery store in Texas, when I was in college. I would get on the bus outside the dorm and then get off across the street from the grocery store and go in there. And we didn't have cloth bags, so you had to use plastic bags and try to carry them back on the bus to go back to the apartment. So needless to say, I was thin back then. You did a lot of walking, a lot of public transportation, and carrying a lot of things. And we had real textbooks in college, and you wrote papers. You took notes in class with pen and paper or spiral notebooks, and then you would go to the computer lab and write your papers and print them out. And, you know, it was different back then. So I don't know if you want to go back to that. But it's a great show, Love Story. It is a great show, and I do have some nostalgia because I moved to New York in 2000. Went to flight attendant training in January of 2000, graduated February, and was sent to New York. And living in New York for that 1 year in 2000 was a lot of fun. And dating in New York back then was a lot of fun. So enjoy the show, Love Story on Hulu, about Carolyn Bessette Kennedy and John F. Kennedy Jr.